right, well, welcome everyone. This is a highlight of my month to be able to connect with intercessors and concerned citizens across the nation who want to learn more about what Liberty Counsel Action's doing, as well as learn more about some of the hot topics that are out nationally, well, internationally, as well as the federal and state level. So we appreciate you all for being here. We have a full lineup today. And again, just a reminder, if anybody would like to share the promo on the Liberty Counsel Action Facebook pages to invite people to join us right now, feel free to do that. Also, there's a lot of information covered, so feel free to take notes. And I will send this out to through email as well to those that are on our list, and a link to the recording as well as some of the resources that we'll reference here. Again, these issues are complex. Liberty Counsel, lc.org and lcaction.org goes into more detail about a lot of these topics. There's a plethora of information and resources on there that we hope you'll become familiar with and share. This information is to help equip you, help equip our leaders, our citizens, so that people know what to do and how to take action. So with that, let's get started. Mariah is up first. We have Mariah joining us this morning. Mariah Gondero, she is a litigation counsel for Liberty Counsel, an amazing woman of God that is going to be giving us some updates on legal updates specifically. Mariah, before you get started, would you open us in prayer, please, and then go right into those updates?
Yes, I can do that. Thank you. Dear God, I just thank you so much, Lord, for just this opportunity to fellowship with like-minded believers and just put all of our requests for you, God. All of us just have a desire to see the word of God spread in this country, and we're all playing a part in changing our society, whether by prayer or in the legal realm or advocacy. And I just pray that you will just protect this ministry, protect this prayer call. I pray that Liberty Counsel will be just continue to be a vessel for you and your truth, and that you will give us the strength and the courage to continue to just stand up for your truth in these end times, God. Just remind us, Lord, of how short our time is on this planet, and you are coming back soon, and you are coming back for a spotless bride. And I just pray that we keep our focus on you during this prayer call, that it'll be a time of uplifting, Lord. And I just pray that you will move in all of us, just give us words of knowledge for one another, and words of encouragement, and just remind us that we are all one body in you, and we are a big family, and we're all going to be praising you one day on the other side of heaven. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Mariah. Yes, if you go ahead and share those any legal updates with us. I know you have some key cases that we need to be aware of. So thank you.
Yes. It's always hard to know where to begin because Liberty Counsel is involved in so many different issues. So I'll start with a few of the main cases. We have the Calvary Chapel, Belfast versus Maine. We are representing a church who was denied. Well, it was originally awarded a bid to lease the property for the University of Maine. The University of Maine rescinded the bid after they experienced a lot of public pushback because of the church's religious beliefs. We filed a lawsuit because the university's decision to rescind the bid was based upon religious discrimination. We also have the famous case Zinski versus Liberty University. This is another really big, pivotal case that we definitely need a lot of a prayer on. Just a little background on this case. Jonathan Zinski was an employee for Liberty University and the IT department. He had signed on to Liberty University and agreed to their doctrinal statement. And part of their doctrinal statement is that employees will agree to abide by biblical values and involving human biology. But 90 days after his probation, he decided to transition and change his gender, which obviously conflicted with the university's doctrinal statement. And so, because he was in violation of that, the university, in accordance with their religious beliefs, decided to terminate him because he was in contradiction to the doctrinal statement. He filed a lawsuit claiming that the Liberty University discriminated against him because of his sex, his sexual orientation, and his decision to transition his gender. And this case is really monumental because it highlights the interplay that we see between Title VII, which is an anti-discrimination law that forbids businesses and organizations from discriminating against employees because of their sex, um, with religious organizations' religious rights. So we recently had a monumental case, Bostock, at the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court held that sexual orientation is protected under Title VII. But what the Supreme Court did not decide is whether religious organizations or religious entities like Liberty University have to comply with Title VII if doing so would violate their religious beliefs, which is what is happening here. Zinsky clearly violated the university's doctrinal statement. The case is now at the Fourth Circuit. We are hopeful that it's going to set very strong precedent in favor of religion. So those are the two big cases we have going on right now.
Excellent. Does anybody have any questions for Mariah?
I
Good.
do, and if it's inappropriate to talk about that, that's fine. But I was reading. It just came on my phone. It was from something else other than Liberty Counsel, and it threw a monkey wrench into the whole thinking that this person Zinsky is a guy and wants to be a girl, and it doesn't matter which way you go. But that he considers himself to be a Christian and that his religion is very important to him. I think he sings in the choir or is involved and feels very much discriminated against as a Christian. And I kind of assumed that he wasn't, but there are people that have in their hearts accepted Jesus Christ as Lord, but they're not particularly Bible believing or Bible studying. Does that complicate matters for you guys?
Not in this case because it's his conduct that is clearly in violation with the university's doctrinal statement. So, regardless of what he believes in his Christian beliefs, Liberty University is a Bible-based university, and they are looking at his conduct, and his conduct does not match their doctrinal statement, which is based upon the Word of God.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
This is Debbie in Virginia. I have a question about the Calvary Chapel. We know the Zinsky case is at the Fourth Circuit.
Yes.
Where are we with Calvary Chapel?
We have also appealed that to the First Circuit. The lower court judge in Maine denied our request for a preliminary injunction, which is not surprising. We have often found here at Liberty Counsel that we have more success the higher we go. A lot of district court judges rule against us, which is great because if we get a successful ruling at the circuit court, we are able to set even broader precedent.
Thank you.
Excellent. I love that the motto is kind of never give up at
Yes.
Liberty Counsel Ministries as a whole. I did want to just mention also for intercessors that we are looking to overturn, or do you want to go into that, Mariah? What we kind of the top 5 cases or top 5 rulings
Yes.
that we want to see overturned.
I don't know if I can get through top five in a short amount of time.
Well, even just, I mean, I can even list them if you want, but yeah, just quickly.
I'll highlight a few key cases that we have been involved with and helped bring momentum to the Supreme Court. One of them being Chiles versus Salazar. This is a challenge to Colorado's ban on conversion therapy. As many of you guys know, Matt Staver has been very active across the country in the past decade trying to challenge these bills in liberal states like New Jersey and Michigan that prevent Christian counselors from being able to practice their faith from a biblical perspective. And so this case right now is at the Supreme Court. And the plaintiff, who is a Christian counselor, is arguing that the ban violates her religious speech because she is prevented from being able to counsel people in accordance to the Bible. We are very hopeful that this is going to rule in our favor, which is a huge win for Liberty Counsel because we have been very active on this front in helping set the stage for the Supreme Court. We also have the monumental case, Employment Division versus Smith. I'm sure Daniel has talked about this case. This is a Supreme Court case that really complicated the First Amendment. It requires that basically, if someone brings a First Amendment challenge, they have to show that a law. Sorry, did I cut out?
It's cutting out for some reason.
Can you hear me?
Not me. I can hear it from Orlando.
Yeah, I've got it too. I think
Okay,
you actually froze for a second, so it might be your connection. I hope not, but
okay, good. Well, Mariah, go ahead, continue. I apologize.
That's okay. The other case is Employment Division versus Smith. And this was a Supreme Court case that really complicated the First Amendment and required any religious adherent to show whenever they challenge a law or regulation that the law specifically targeted religion. Whereas before Employment Division versus Smith, all you had to show was that the law substantially burdened their religion. And so we are hoping to eventually get this case overturned back to what the original intent of the First Amendment is, which is you should be able to show is that the regulation or the law or the government conduct substantially burdens the free exercise of religion.
Excellent. Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Mariah. So appreciate you. So appreciate you taking time to be on and to give us those key updates. You did an amazing job as usual. We're going to go now to Jonathan Alexander, who's currently, he's been working diligently on the Hill. He's working on international issues as well as key bills and concerns at the federal level, and also is in the know at the state level. So Jonathan has been working hard, and we appreciate you taking time today now, Jonathan, to give us an update on the reconciliation bill, and specifically as it relates to the defining of Planned Parenthood, as well as some of the international treaties and anything else that you feel like is relevant for us today.
Well, thank you so much, Summer, and thank you, Mariah, for those critical updates. You know, much of the work that Liberty Counsel as a law firm does is downstream of the cultural conversations, the political conversations, and of course, the legislative enactments that impact what daily American citizens are able to do. And so the protections that are in the Constitution when they're challenged, but also the laws that go through the federal and state levels, if they're not properly adjudicated, if they're not properly respecting biblical principles, then downstream of that, you have a culture that's reacting and revolting to this. And you see many of the cases that come up through Liberty Counsel's work, trying to right some of the wrongs that are done at the legislative level. And so we've taken a particular attention to some of the trends that have occurred in the past few weeks, really in the past few years almost, and trying to stem the tide of some of these pervasive evils as they impact culture and ultimately bring about these cases later on. I sort of want to set that out as a general sort of worldview understanding why we do the work, public policy work, looking downstream to the eventual cases that we'll have to litigate. One way to look at how law comes down to everyday practical Americans having to react to it is by seeing what's happening in the international community. And so I want to focus first on some of the trends that we've seen internationally and how downstream from that we're seeing the effects here on American culture. I'll talk about that first, the international implications, particularly when it comes to sex exploitation and explicit content. Then, as Summer mentioned, I'll also talk about the reconciliation bill. Of course, if you've been paying attention, you'll know that our priority is to defund Planned Parenthood and big abortion. And so we'll talk in depth, sort of an inside baseball about what's going on the Hill, literally even today and in the next few weeks when it comes to defunding Planned Parenthood. And then I'll talk a bit about the rescissions package. So it's a word that you may have heard often, talking about how the executive branch, so the power of the presidency, is he able to claw back funding that's already been sent out? So Congress appropriating or putting forward, this is how we're going to spend our budget, them already writing the checks and sending it out. Can the president come in and claw that money back? And what are some of the issues that are being highlighted when the president wants to pull back money? What is he taking money away from? So we'll talk about those three issues, hopefully very quickly. When it comes to international law affecting American law, there's one particular area that we're paying attention to this week. Earlier this year and late until last year, the United Nations General Assembly wanted to introduce a cybersecurity treaty that they wanted at least 40 countries to ratify, a number of countries all across the world to participate in. And it had some very concerning elements in it. This is a cyber crime treaty that wants to either criminalize or decriminalize certain things. And they've chosen to focus on child pornography. Articles 14, 15, and 16 focus on child pornography, but they do so in a very insidious way that has downstream effects on U.S. culture. What they've done in this treaty is replace the words child pornography with CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material. In the past, and in U.S. law and under most international agreements, but certainly under U.S. Federal criminal code and many state codes, any depiction of child pornography was considered illegal. You could not do any depiction, whether it was virtual or cartoons. Any depiction whatsoever was illegal for two reasons. One, it just as a moral outcry, the law being something that does teach and instruct and sort of constrain people, saying that this isn't going to be part of American culture. We don't want any depictions whatsoever of child pornography. It's just flat out evil. It's wrong. We shouldn't be consuming or participating that. And so we've set that out as our law. And secondly, it allows the particular category of child pornography to receive increased criminal penalties because they wanted to stifle that sort of behavior and that activity. You could have increased penalties that treated child pornography different from regular obscenities or other obscenities that didn't have First Amendment protection. And so for those reasons, the United States has always criminalized child pornography and has identified it as such, any depiction. What this treaty is trying to do and what we've seen start to populate across the states is changing that definition to require there to be child sexual abuse. So it's not any depiction that is now criminalized, but it has to actually involve a child. It's sort of waiting until a child is being used or mistreated in that regard, and there are images or videos taken and shared. They're waiting for that level of perversion to occur before they criminalizing it, sort of rewriting the rules, saying it's okay to do cartoons, it's okay to do AI, it's okay to do visualizations or representations of child pornography, so long as there's not a kid involved. And what that does, another two things that it does. One, it allows deep fakes and AI to compile the same sort of egregious material and populate that without any parameters against it, without any restrictions, criminal restrictions. It allows that material to be prevalent and shared, but it also allows for these cartoon images. Of course, you and I, if you've paid attention to what your grandchildren or your children are bringing home, have seen an increase in the sexually explicit material that's being taught in so-called healthcare curriculums or health frameworks across schools. These public schools basically putting out filth and pornographic material to children, saying, hey, we need to teach them of the safe way to practice these activities, things that your eyes and no innocent eyes should be viewing. But because they're in cartoon form and because they fall under an education exemption, those things have become more and more prevalent. And so when parents or church-based folks and other like-minded individuals have challenged these books, trying to remove these books off the library shelves, trying to take this content away from public schools, they run up against several layers of laws that say, well, as long as a child isn't actually being harmed, as long as there's no real child participating in this cartoon or this AI visual representation of children engaging in sex, it should be fine. We should allow that to happen. And so downstream, where there are very important cases that are going after this content and wanting to remove them from schools, you're seeing a lot of layers of both international and now state law that is barring the success of these cases because they are just cartoon images. There's no real child involved there. If you ask, where did all this come from? Well, you can look back to a treaty like this. You look back to international agreements where other nations that have not been as conservative or as sort of prude in terms of their sexual interactions are putting more and more of this content out and reducing the amount of criminal penalties associated with them. And they do so for about a decade. And then it trickles into American law through these treaties. And so part of our fight, I know it's sort of long-winded, part of our fight is going to the House Foreign and the Senate Foreign committees, those that are actually putting out American dollars to promote certain things and to promote our laws and to fund certain things like programs that go one way or another on this issue. We expose that, hey, if you're not paying attention to these treaties that are occurring at the UN, occurring in Geneva or in New York, if you're not paying attention to these subtle changes in languages, then 10 years down the road, none of the cases that we'll bring up will be successful because they're about at that time, at the time that you're bringing the case, maybe 4 or 5 different layers of complexity when it comes to those statutes that are in place that are making it very difficult for these cases to be successful. If we don't fight it early on and look at the subtle language changes early on, we're not going to be successful later on when these cases actually come up. And so part of the work that we've been doing, particularly this week, even yesterday, is sitting down with members, sitting down with their staff and saying, pay close attention to these subtle changes of language. Child pornography must remain criminal. Any depiction of child porn must remain criminal, and you do not have to wait until there's an actual child in terms of the child sexual abuse. You don't have to wait till there's an actual child there in order for it to continue to be criminalized. Criminalize it, nip it at the bud, so we don't have to deal with these problems down the road. So that's one aspect to pay attention to. The next 2 things I'll try to run through a bit quicker, but it also has to do with how we're spending our money. So the president, through Doge, and of course Doge and the work that Elon Musk has become pretty popular recently, they've put out a rescissions package. It's a small package, only $9 billion, that says to Congress, hey, you've already put this money out. You've allocated it for 2 specific areas that they're going after, NPR and PBS funding, and then PEPFAR. We'll get into what those 2 things are. You've already allocated this money, but it's no longer consistent with what the administration that is in place now. It's no longer consistent with general American federal public policy now. So we want to claw back that portion. And so the president sends a rescission package to Congress. There's 45 days to which Congress can react to it. The House will probably go first. I think they want to go as early as next week and take up that bill. And then the Senate will work through that rescissions package, send it back to the president's desk to be able to just claw back that money, basically stopping the checks from being written to fund these 2 programs. Why they chose those 2 programs, NPR and PBS, of course, there are decent aspects of public broadcasting. You and I all of us, I think, in several generations have been raised with PBS and NPR and sort of know the the good cultural representation that is given to, Sesame Street and even concerts that are played on PBS or NPR talking through everyday American challenges on your ride to work. And so all of us are sort of familiar with the work that they've done, but increasingly over 90% of the content that they put out has been skewed extreme left. They're pushing the LGBT stuff from Sesame Street. Almost every one of their stories on NPR and almost every one of the reporters that are reporting for NPR all across the states have a 90% bend towards leftist agenda. And so they're pushing back against the Trump administration, pushing back against common conservative values and using public funding to do so. And so part of what's being clawed back is just saying, hey, if you're going to use American taxpayer dollars, you must have a mainstream approach to how you're communicating political messages. And so that first rescission goes to NPR and PBS saying, we're going to claw back the money that you've given to those entities unless they want to change their political positions and be more neutral in terms of reporting. The second clawback that's going to be in this package is PEPFAR. So PEPFAR is effectively the HIV and AIDS program that the U.S. has used in African countries or Latin American countries in order to promote medicine, send doctors out. It's it's a massive pool of money, almost $1.3 billion. About 400 million goes to our sort of diplomatic work through humanitarian relief. So helping other countries out, building up relationships diplomatically by giving them humanitarian relief and focusing on certain diseases that occur in those areas of the world. Well, of course, as many programs have been done under the Biden and Obama administration, they've been hijacked such that under that funding, you see an increase in a promotion or actually providing abortions to these African and Latin American countries that don't want that. They have a moral repudiation against abortion or against the LGBT agenda, but we're using American funds to promote that and almost give the stick along with the carrot saying, hey, if you want to receive humanitarian assistance from the United States, you have to be promoting this in the country despite it being against their cultural norms. And so part of the money that wants to be rescinded, that's going to be pulled back, is saying, hey, we're taking back that pool of money that is inconsistent with U.S. values. Stop propping up abortion. Stop propping up liberal sexual health policies when you're giving American dollars. The very last thing that I'll mention is what Summer sort of started with, the reconciliation package. We've shepherded this language through the House, very successful, albeit narrow, vote 215 to 214 to ensure that not one more penny goes to the abortion conglomerate Planned Parenthood, but also a number of other entities. Those that are receiving over $1 million in Medicaid funding also don't receive not one more penny to prop up their so-called family planning, what we know to be abortion. What's incredible is that we offered to the House sort of three options. They chose the highest option, which was a 10-year moratorium on any payment going to Planned Parenthood or these abortion facilities. So an incredible win out of the House. It gets sent over to the Senate. And because it is in this one big, beautiful bill, and there are a number of other issues, including tax issues, state and local tax issues, energy credits, defense, border, there's a lot in there that the Senate wants to be able to rewrite to focus on what their priorities are, being consistent with, of course, the Trump agenda and what the House has passed, but the Senate wants to take a bite at the apple. One thing we have to pray for, and this is probably the two walkaway praying points, is the first, that language to defund Planned Parenthood and big abortion remains in there, that it's not changed, that it's the 10-year moratorium on payment. Let Planned Parenthood go fund themselves. They can find their own money if they want to commit abortions and be in this sort of transgender health space. The second thing, which is equally important, is that the Senate leadership does not stand in the way or slow the process down. You have a July 4th date that the president has sort of set out. Senate leadership in the past 6 months, I think, has sort of been taken aback by the work ethic and the efficiency from the House. The House worked through this issue very well, and a number of issues very quickly in a timely fashion, and offered an incredible bill. The Senate was sort of taken back that the horse race was won by the House, And so there may be some politicking, there may be some egos involved in the Senate saying, well, we contributed to this package as well. And in doing so, maybe slowing down the package. So one of, I think, really the candid prayers that we ought to pray for is that egos in politics get out of the way, and that what a good, morally conservative package and what a good fiscal conservative package can look like isn't slowed down by members that we do get along with and we do trust in terms of their getting their work done, but that the politics and ego sort of stays out of it, and that this good package go forward. So that's certainly a prayer point. Remember to keep the innocence of children primarily, in the forefront, not reduce criminal penalties for child pornography, be able to claw back this money that's going internationally for abortions, and that lastly, this defund Planned Parenthood and big abortion language stay in there, and that there's a spirit of unity, understanding that the more we stick close to God's principles on this issue, and the more our federal dollars reflect that, the more God honoring we can be, and the more that God will continue to bless this country.
Thank you, Jonathan, for those very elaborate updates. Very, very helpful. I had a couple quick questions for you. One, on the reconciliation bill, do we have a new timeline on that? Do we know, I know right now there's a lot of negotiating and things going on, but do we know when they hope to get this past the finish line?
Yeah, the president wants to sign it on July 4th. So I anticipate a White House ceremony where there's a signing. In order to get that, what's come over from the House has to go through a number of committees. So there's about 6 or so committees that have jurisdiction over in the Senate. They can do one of two things. They can just take the House language and pass it through their committees, or the Rules Committee over in the House, Budget and Rules Committee, can just consolidate the language from the other committees if they are working through it, and sort of conference that language with what the House has already passed and send that to the president by July 4th. Or what will more than likely happen is that the Finance Committee in the Senate will try to rewrite the bill. A number of other committees, including Senate Armed Services that just put out their text yesterday, will try to rewrite the bill, and that'll have to be conferenced with the House ultimately to send to the president. There are real issues at stake. We have a spending deadline that'll come up potentially in August or September that needs to be addressed before we default on our loan. Is the ability for us to pay our interest. So that may be attached to the bill. There's a number of business tax reliefs that are within that bill. There's also the General Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that is going to lapse at the end of this year that needs to be added or implemented in this bill for Americans not to have their taxes as a whole be raised by trillions of dollars. So there are legitimate, serious issues that have to be meted out. But there's a way that can be done without harming the process or slowing it down. So July 4th is an end date for us to look at. But all along the way, there are going to be markers, including next week when the Finance Committee sends out their text. There's going to be markers all along the way for us to be able to get a good gauge on where this bill stands and if it's going to contain the language that we're paying attention to, which is the Planned Parenthood language. So July 4th is the deadline, and a lot of markers along the way for us to get there.
It's so exciting. This is the closest that we've ever been and potentially ever will be to defunding Planned Parenthood. So let's keep praying this through. One other quick question on this topic is when or how long are they proposing Planned Parenthood to be defunded? I've heard a couple different dates. A couple different timelines. One, a year, another 10 years. How long are they looking to defund Planned Parenthood through this bill?
That's an excellent point. In 2017, it was just a year, and you'll remember John McCain's no vote that kind of sank that bill. It was going to be in the package that repealed Obamacare. So that was just a year. And the question was, hey, do we just do what we did, 7 years ago, or do we go all out? Thankfully, the Republican Party, under Mike Johnson's leadership, this came from the top down. He said, let's go all out. So it was that 10-year language that was put in place. So if this language continues, if Leader Thune and the Senate Republicans get behind this language, then for 10 years, upwards of $700 million every year will be taken away from Planned Parenthood, and they will have to go find their money elsewhere. And they won't be able to use American taxpayer funds to continue to commit these atrocities through abortion.
So, friends, please consider fasting and praying and asking your networks to fast and pray. Let's believe God that we will see Planned Parenthood defunded for a minimum of 10 years in this nation. Thank you for that, Jonathan. I had one other question on the Cybercrimes Treaty. My understanding is that they've actually already signed that, right? It's already been adopted, I should say, and they're planning on signing it in Vietnam in July. Do you know what I imagine, since it originally was adopted in 2024, that the US was for it? Is that your understanding? And do you know, is there any plans on, if so, revoking our support for that treaty?
Yeah, that's a good point. So you need about 40 nations to ratify the treaty, and in our process, it has to go through 2/3 of the Senate and have the president ratify it or sign on to it for us to join into this treaty. It was at the tail end of 24, which means Biden was in office. He was obviously vocally in support of it, as you can imagine. I don't anticipate this president will be, but to the point of getting the word out there, we were taken aback that it hasn't made the news that it should make, or it hasn't gone across even the State Department in a manner that was convincing enough to let us know that this administration knew exactly what was in it and will put up the fight, both as they ratify it and sign it in Hanoi, Vietnam, and ultimately where the administration stands on this. We didn't get complete confidences there. So it's important to make noise about it, that particular part of the treaty. But at the same time, we obviously have a more favorable president to these issues than the previous president. We still have a presence at the UN, so it is worth the effort of our diplomats that are there to highlight just that one aspect. It's Articles 14, 15, and 16, and just say, hey, if we mess up in this area down the road, we'll never be able to claw back some of this offensive material that's become part of American public life. So it's worth us doubling down and making sure that both the State Department and the president know full well what's going on in this treaty, and that even if they don't participate in it, do everything they can so that the other 40 nations that's needed to ratify this treaty don't push it forward.
Excellent. So we can encourage people to contact their members of Congress and express their concerns with this. Also, my understanding is this is a trend at the state level that we need to be watching for. So we encourage people to be praying again that this strategy is nipped in the bud, and that there's the proper changes to the language so that we are banning all forms of child pornography or abuse at every level. So thank you, Jonathan, again for this update. This is very important and gives us some prayer, a lot of prayer points to focus on. So thank you, Jonathan, very much. And lastly, I'm just going to give a quick update as it relates to the pandemic treaty. I know last month I shared that they did pass a version of the pandemic treaty out of the Intergovernmental Negotiation Board for the World Health Assembly, which was again May 19th through the 27th. So they did pass the pandemic treaty, but the good news is that it's a diplomatic win and not necessarily as much of a legal win. There's still the core component of this treaty is the PAB system, the Pathogen Access Benefit Sharing System. They do not have consensus on this at this point. So the pandemic treaty was passed 124 to 124 in favor of passage, but there was still no consensus on the PAB system. They're now going to be creating a separate group, a negotiating group, to start fleshing out the framework and the details related to the PABs in hopes that the underdeveloped countries will come on board, that all those who are concerned with the PAB system will come on board. There's multiple concerns with the PAB system. One, the main obstacle, we'll just share the main obstacles, is the sharing of pathogens, which essentially are organisms that cause disease. So although there's multiple concerns with potentially not getting access, that's how they're proposing that it's concerning that nations wouldn't receive the pathogens in time to potentially create vaccines. But in my opinion, the greater concern here is that they're sharing organisms that can cause disease, which can quickly spread a disease. Big pharma is another concern. The big pharma would be benefiting from the vaccine production related to this any spreading of diseases. There's concerns with global cooperation and political will, equal access to resources and treatments, sustainable financing, compliance and enforcement mechanisms. There's also sovereignty concerns and privacy concerns with data sharing transparency. It's somewhat of a complex issue. I definitely encourage people to research more the specifics related to the PABS system. But the good news is that they do not have consensus on that it looks like it's potentially a long road ahead before they do get it. They're saying potentially a year or even longer. The more good news is that they won't be able to ratify it until they do get consensus on that. So they need 60 countries to ratify that pandemic treaty, which again, they will not be able to even start that process until they have consensus on the PABS system. So we can pray that one, they do not get consensus on the PABS system and essentially that the entire pandemic treaty unravels. It's absolutely possible. I think there's enough concerns when you start to look through all the details of it that nations will not want to sign on. Also, Liberty Counsel Action is working with government leaders. We're actually at a conference this week in Lynchburg with a network of government leaders who are Christians, and they're launching an international Christian network of government leaders. So the good news is, I like sharing good news. Some of the positive things that are happening on this topic is that there are more international networks forming of government leaders and leaders in all spheres of influence, and that we and others are sharing critical resources to help equip leaders with the concerns with these various treaties, including the pandemic treaty, the PAB system. So let's continue to pray again, as I mentioned before, those two topics, but also that we see more networks form and nations taking a stand against the concerns related to a variety of these treaties, that nations revoke their support for the international health regulations, the pandemic treaty, the global, Pact of the Future, the Global Digital Compact. There's a number of treaties that there are tremendous concerns about, and we want to continue to pray that nations will start to understand the concerns with these treaties, revoke their signature or their withdraw, exit, defund some of these groups that are advancing these treaties. It's more, again, I know we all know the power of prayer and united strategic action. So let's just continue to believe for some positive advancements on these international fronts, and that the U.S. will be intentional, that our federal and state lawmakers will be intentional in passing bills that will protect us, shield us from the agendas that we know are at play or in process, or just waiting until we get a president or somebody who's not like-minded. There's a lot that can be done to shield us from these agendas. So let's continue to pray again that our government leaders are proactive in passing these protections. And again, Liberty Counsel Action is in the mix, in the details. We're helping to provide key resources on every level. And so please continue to pray for our team as well, that we get everything done in a timely manner, and that we're able to make the connections that we need to make, and that we'll see fruit as it relates to seeing these agendas.